That's not like a thing that every planet does. It's just like a mistake of our planet. Hi there. Welcome to Sound and Fury Book Reviews. This is one of my old school science fiction reviews. First, I just want to say that I have, I think 8 or 9 other reviews that I did a long time ago. I was going to post them on the site just kind of willy-nilly, but then I kind of looked at them and they're kind of trash. So I think I'm just gonna, I found my old notes, so I think I'm just gonna refilm them like one a month until they're done. I've got like, let's see here, I got like Rogue Queen and like vector analysis. I've got all these ones that I really like and I really like to talk about, so I'm going to do that. So next month I think I'll post Rogue Queen, and then after that I don't know, find some kind of schedule. Anyway, what I read this time was Alien Planet by Fletcher Pratt. So this is a it's a commendable effort for its time, 1932. If you read this book today, it is like super dry to the point of like it needs some like moisturizer in it. It's so slow. I kept flipping to see how many pages were left, and it's so unremarkable that I have trouble even thinking about anything really interesting about it to talk about. No, that's not true. I do have a lot to talk about, but it's just like it's super boring. So I'm just gonna kind of talk about. I'm going to give like a general review of it without any spoilers, and then I'm going to get into a kind of spoilery discussion about it, where I'm going to talk about the technology and kind of the social critique it was trying to make, as well as the representation of women. Spoiler alert, there's not a lot of women in this book. So anyway, what is this book about? It is a found text story, so that actually is one of the more interesting things about it, about a man named Alvin Shirested, and his journey with an alien to the alien's homeworld. Yeah, So this novel is frustrating in many ways. Alvin gets no character development whatsoever, and the alien named Shembe even less so. I believe that Pratt was convinced that the readers would be so blown away by the like fantastical elements of the story that he didn't need to include much character development or even really that much of a plot. I can't tell you a single thing about Alvin other than he's a bondsman and he likes taking his summer vacations at the lake. He has no personality, and there's no mention of a family, his upbringing, or anything really in his background. Ashembe himself is laughably bland for an alien. He looks like a typical white dude, but with a bald head. On the cover, there are these like cool, like multi-legged aliens. These do not feature in the story. Oh, why are they on the cover then? Why would you tease me this way? Anyway, most of the novel includes scientifically dated or implausible descriptions of technology and way too much telling and not showing. Like, we learn everything about the alien social structure and culture from what Shembe tells Alvin, like not from Alvin kind of venturing out on his own and learning about it. I did like the various planets they went to, even though they were like probably extremely inaccurate. And Pratt clearly put a lot of effort into making this like a realistic story. Like he's trying to make it like if someone, like a real found text aspect. Like if someone were to pick this up that was from the 30s and be like, this is real? What? I mean, he's probably getting inspiration from like Orson Welles' The Whole War of the Worlds broadcast thing. Or it's a good attempt. It's not his fault. He was born on the wrong side of the fin de sec. I think he was actually born in like 1897 or something. I have a little bit about him in my spoiler section too. The ending, I liked it because it was unexpected, but I did feel like the author wasn't sure how to end the story. So I didn't hate this novel at all. It's just, it was very dull and didn't have a lot of redeemable qualities. So based on my little chart, I give it a 2 out of 5 stars. 2 out of 5 cometary cars, because that's what he calls his spaceship, a cometary car. That's kind of awesome, but also kind of very 1930s. So that's kind of my basic review of the novel. If you want to actually go and read it, because it's quite short, you can read it and then come back and watch my review, but I don't think you're going to because of how boring I say it is. So I'm just going to kind of give you the basic overview of the plot, because the plot, while it's not very, you know, it's not wild in any way, it is kind of interesting. And then I'm going to talk about the author. I'm going to talk about, as I said, a couple kind of analysis-y things about it, but not too much because this book isn't that deep. So Wikipedia has a blurb about it, but it's not correct. The ending is different. I don't know why. This happens a lot, I find, with these old sci-fis. I'll go and like check at Wikipedia to like look up to see if there's anything interesting about the book. Like, did it win any awards, or did it, was it featured in some kind of like scandal, things like that. Yeah, this one just has like the wrong plot, and this happens a lot. Basically, the plot. So there's these two dudes, they're hanging out at their summer cottage, a meteor lands in their pond. They ignore it and go to bed. I'm only saying this detail because it's so incredulous that they're like, oh, I'll deal with it in the morning. They just go to bed. I'm like, what? In the morning, a guy comes out of the meteor comet thing. He looks like a regular white dude, but he has no hair. He has a weird helmet that he just, like, they kind of shuffle him into their house, and he eats, and then he falls asleep wearing the helmet, and he learns things while reading it. I can't even remember. I mean, this book's so short, I can't remember how they got onto this, but they started reading him Shakespeare. I think they read him The Tempest. It teaches him English overnight, and he talks in this kind of weird old English, which is actually kind of funny. He then says he needs to rebuild his commentary car, as he's on a mission to find resources for his people. He has this ability to turn regular stuff into gold. I guess he's an alchemist. And he uses that to pay for supplies for his ship, and he uses a lot of mercury, apparently, to get his ship to lift off. So the cops kind of catch on to what they think is money laundering, and there's this huge cop chase. I mean, the cops like shoot a man based on money laundering. I'm like, what is this? I guess it was the 30s. And there was a big whole thing of prohibition and gangsters and stuff. Alvin and the alien escape in the ship. They end up going to Venus, and then they go to Mercury. There's actually a long chapters set in these two places, but it's really not that exciting. There's a lot of walking. They're then in space for something like 4 years before they reach a Shem-based planet, because they have to like loop around Jupiter and whatever. They land in this hunting zone of the planet where they send all the teenagers, I guess, to make them come of age. It's a whole thing. They then make it to a city where Alvin is placed in an apartment. He then has to talk to the alien council, and because he recites some like poetry for them from Earth, he recites like some weird limerick, they decide that he's going to be an artist, and they're like, you're an artist now. Go do artist things. He goes to like a party. He finds out there's these seditious group of people that want to overthrow the government. They blackmail him, and then in the end he gets caught. This happens all in the last like 4 pages. He gets caught, and then the story ends by him saying that he's either going to have a lobotomy and put into a manual labor for the rest of his life, like digging trenches or something, or made an outcast in society. And then he asks Shumbe to return his journal to Earth for him. That's how it ends. We have no idea what actually happens. I'm like, what? The most exciting part of the book. Anyway, some history on the author, Fletcher Pratt. There he is. He was born in 1897, as I said. He had a pretty typical life, except when he was arrested for robbery while attending university. His family owned this estate, or I guess they come into this estate. It's a 31-room Victorian mansion called the Ipsy Wipsy Institute, overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, and then he uses it to have these like marathon weekend like Gatsby like parties there. It's kind of awesome, actually. He is a very like technical dude. He invented what sounds like an amped up version of Battleship that's based on math. All I thought of was like Cones of Dunshire from Parks and Rec. I don't think this weird math Battleship game though anyone plays, because it sounds like it would be not a lot of fun. Dude died in 1956. 29 years before I was even born. He wrote a lot of nonfiction about naval history, the Civil War, World War II, and he wrote some more sci-fis as well. And his wife illustrated some of his novels, which is kind of cool. So, as I said, kind of the most interesting thing about this novel is that it's a found text narrative. So Pratt pretends that he's found this book and has added a bunch of footnotes to it. Kind of like it's like House of Leaves, I guess. Perhaps that's his excuse as to why it's poorly characterized. Like, Alvin wouldn't have been talking about his past in this journal kind of thing. He's like recounting his story. But you'd think though, being trapped in an alien spaceship for 4 years with nothing to do, he would have at least done something like that. He could have had a section where he talks about his backstory because he has nothing else to write about. Kind of the major issue I have about this novel is the fact that Ashembe looks like a regular human being minus no hair. Like, first of all, what is he, like the Avatar or something? He claims at one point that it's adaptive symmetry, which I guess is something like convergent evolution, like the idea that, an alien, on a planet like ours, aliens most likely would develop similarly to us. They would be bipedal, they would have certain digits on their hands, they would, if it was an oxygen planet, like they would have lungs, like things like that. Like there is a way that the universe kind of makes things similar. We have the examples of this on Earth, like with fish, right? Fish in different oceans, in different lakes, they all kind of look the same. They have the same concept. So it's kind of that idea. But I mean, even on Earth, obviously, we have different races. And so it's kind of unimaginative in my mind that an alien would just show up looking like a white dude with like no hair. Like, I'm like, this is the worst alien concept I've ever heard of in my entire life. Also, there's a funny part where Ashembe takes Alvin to a museum and they look at dinosaurs. I'm like, why does this planet have dinosaurs? Not every planet had dinosaurs. Like, another failing of the book is how in the ship, Alvin states that between him and Ashembe for years, literally they're there for years, there was nothing to talk about. Really? Nothing? Like, he couldn't have prepped you on what to expect on his society? Like, what else would you talk about? Like, there literally isn't any space on that ship either. Like, they don't have any space. So what are they? They're just sitting in a room together, like, not talking. There was a part that made me laugh. For some reason, Shembe has these math textbooks, and Alvin doesn't like reading math, but he said, however deep my boredom, it did not reach the level of reading abstruse volumes of subjects of which I knew nothing. I thought that was kind of funny. It's like, yeah, I'm so bored, but I'm still not going to read a bunch of math. He does find a pack of cards. I'm not sure why he has cards, and he plays endless games of solitaire. I guess trying to guess the outcomes. Funny story. So when I was like 12 or 11, I started writing, and my dad was like, oh God. So he gave me this old Windows 3.1 like Dell laptop I guess he had from work, and all it had on it was Excel and Word and Solitaire. And so sometimes I would play Solitaire, and then I would track the outcomes of the games in a spreadsheet. And what I was trying to figure out was whether if you got a higher score in the game, you got more of those jumping black cards than white backed cards. So you know, if you play old Solitaire, when the cards jump out at you, they had different, you know, they had either white or black on the back, and you'd only get a few of the black ones. So I was trying to figure out whether there was some kind of a correlation between winning and getting black backed cards. Yeah, that's my life. I don't do that anymore. Do I? I'm going to talk about the technology now because, yeah. Okay, so there's way too much tech in this book for me to kind of go into ways that the science is wrong or right or semi-correct and blah, blah, blah. There's just way too much to deal with the planets that he lands on and space travel, things like that. So I'm just going to say, though, that Venus does not have swamps on it. That's probably the most important thing to note. But he does have some cool gadgets. He has a heat ray, which is basically a plasma gun. And he says, you know, when like they find it on the ground, him and his buddy, before the alien talks to them, and they point it and it shoots. They're like, whoa. And he says, luckily I wasn't looking into the thing when I turned it on. Like Luke Skywalker with a lightsaber. The tensile helmet is something else he has. I mentioned it before. It's that thing he wears to sleep, and then when he sleeps, it absorbs the information. So this is actually, there's a footnote saying this is actually based on a real study at Pensacola on naval officers, I guess in World War II, teaching them how to learn to do radio while they slept. And there's a whole article about it that I'll include in the link or in the description because it's actually kind of interesting. He talks about 3D chess. I wonder if Gene Roddenberry read this story and then like put it in Star Trek, because I mean, it's not as exciting or interesting in the alien planet because, according to Pratt, it takes you have to be like a mathematician to play it. I'm pretty sure Captain Kirk was not a mathematician. There's also a footnote where Pratt claims that there were pages upon pages of how to play the game, but he didn't think they were of any possible interest to readers, so he didn't include them. Yeah, right, bud. You made a whole Clones of Dunchild game. You can put 3D chess in your book, bud. Give me a break. You're lazy. There's also the Shoraru, which is the ship. I have no idea how big this ship is supposed to be or what it looks like. He says it's curved, but I don't understand how he built it out of like literally nothing. And apparently it goes 16 times the speed of light. So I think, okay, correct me if I'm wrong because I've not watched Star Trek in a while. Like, I'm derelict on Star Trek. So warp 10 is like 10 times the speed of light, right? And warp 10 was like the fastest humans could go without causing them like bodily harm, I think. Anyway, the Shoraru, I guess, is faster than warp 10. I guess is warp 16. It's pretty fast. There's also the typical old school science fiction focuses on like food producers and Zoom calls and things like that, the typical stuff. Okay, so I'm going to get into a bit of analysis here. There's not too much because, as I said, there's not a lot really in this novel in terms of that. So it's clear this novel was attempting some sort of social commentary, but it's not entirely consistent in its message. It doesn't appear that the aliens have a society that's any better than ours. I mean, maybe a little better than 1920. There is a blatant critique of capitalism conflicting with democracy, which is valid. That still happens today. It's even more relevant during the 30s, right after the Great Depression. So that I would have been surprised if the aliens hadn't had some kind of non-capitalist society, given, you know, how badly the Great Depression screwed over everybody in the 30s. And then Ashembe explains how his culture assesses children for like malevolent intent and for crime and things like that, and executes the ones that don't conform. Okay. I'm not really sure what this argument is supposed to be for, or who it's for, unless it's some kind of a satire. I was like, what? Okay. And the aliens are pretty much atheist, which is kind of typical of these stories. There is a funny part where Ashembe confuses Christmas with a heliocentric solar worship marking the turn of the year, which is now what I'm going to say when people ask if I celebrate Christmas. I'm going to say no, I celebrate a heliocentric or solar worship marking the turn of the year. Well, there's also the typical kind of Western early 20th century forgetting that anyone else exists in the world, because he says that Christmas is our great religious festival, assuming that no one else celebrates anything else. Yeah, anyway. Overall, I think for this book, I don't think he's trying to make a statement, to be honest. I think he's just trying to show that there's no perfect societies, and that even a futuristic, you know, utopia has flaws and hidden dark sectors. Or he was just trying to think up something outlandish. I'm not really sure what he's trying to say in this book, or if he's even trying to say anything. He's more focused on like the technology. I'm going to talk a little bit about women in the novel. There's one woman in the entire book. Okay, there's two more, but they don't speak, and they're on the page for like 2 sentences. So this one, she shows up at page like 124 of 188, so it takes a while for her to show up. Her name is Tendanu Kabu. She has a name at least, that's nice. Of course, he rescues her. Actually, he rescues her a couple of times. She does assist him in the rescue. It's not like she's just sitting there being like, oh my god. But still, because, you know, he rescues her, she wants to have his kid. It's nice that she has sexual agency, at least, and it doesn't appear that women are vilified for sex out of wedlock like they would have been back on Earth in the 20s, because Ashembe says, if they have a children while they are in the hunting ground, the responsibility is their own. But in cases where it happens, the mother is nearly always of a high type fitted for lofty administrative or scientific position and receives due credit for her courage. Okay. And then also in Ashembe society, he says that men and women, according to him, are equal and given jobs, and they have, you know, women are in all professions, he says. But the only thing is that it doesn't really, he says this, but it doesn't really ring true when you're reading it, because other than those 2 women that show up for like 2 seconds at a party, all the other background women are, or all the other background characters are pretty much men. There's a couple women on the science council, but out of like, there's like 2 out of like 10. They don't say anything. And we don't see a lot of other women characters doing anything. Like everybody that, like all the aliens that Alvin talks to are men. So, but, you know, that's what I expected for this novel. I was surprised that Tendadu, or whatever her name is, actually showed up at some point. There's no people of color in this novel. Even the aliens, as I said, are not people of color. There's no LGBTQ characters at all. I mean, for a while I was wondering about Alvin and Merrick, his friend at the start. I was like, you know, what's going on there? But there's no, like, subtext there. I was just kind of trying to input some diversity where there was none. So anyway, as I said, not the most exciting book. I got this book for I paid $8 for this book because it was in this fancy little plastic case. I think because it's so old, and it probably is kind of rare. So I paid a little more for it, and I'm going to keep it, but I don't think it was worth $8. It should have been like $3. But yeah. So thanks for watching. I hope that you found it interesting. If you've read Alien Planet or any other Fletcher Pratt's novels, let me know. If you disagree with anything I said, if you think this is the most exciting book you've ever read in your whole life, and you think that I'm crazy for finding it boring, I would love to hear that perspective. And yeah, the next book that I'm going to be reading for old school science fiction, which will be next month, will be... I'm either going to do The Amazons of Semillon, whatever. Michael Moorcock's The Winds of Limbo, or Heroes of Zara Keep by Guy Gregory. I'm not sure yet which one I'm going to do. Ooh. Thank you.